Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea's disease control agency is going to be made independent of the health ministry, an agency in its own right. And it'll be led by the current head of the KCDC, Chung Eun-kyung. A state-run think tank downgrades its forecast for the Korean economy this year because of the recent surge in COVID-19 cases, calling for growth of minus 1.1%. And to help people get their first homes in the Seoul area, the government is letting people get on the list early to buy new homes in the capital region. 60,000 will go to people who qualify. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's disease control agency, which is currently under the health ministry, is going to become an independent administration later this week. That means it'll get more authority and a bigger workforce. In charge will be Chung Eun-kyung, the current director of the KCDC. President Moon says this will take the country's disease response to the next level. Kim Min-ji reports.
The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which has led South Korea's efforts to fight COVID-19, will be elevated to an independent agency this Saturday. And as widely expected, Chung Eun-kyung, the current director of the KCDC, will head the upgraded body.
Chung Eun-kyung has been at the forefront of our quarantine and has been doing her best to overcome the COVID-19 crisis. She has played a big role in making South Korea an exemplary model for quarantine. It's expected that as the first head of the agency, she will be able to lead the country's next leap forward in infectious disease response and disease control and prevention.
The revised Government Organization Act upgrading the KCDC was given the green light during a cabinet meeting led by President Moon Jae-in on Tuesday. Initially, under the Health Ministry, the upgraded agency will handle its own budget and personal affairs. The agency's workforce will be expanded from the current 907 to 1,476, an increase of 42%. It will also monitor infectious diseases around the clock and establish 5 response centers in different regions across the country. A National Research Institute will also be created to conduct studies, clinical testing, and vaccine development.
이미 세계적으로 우수하다고 평가받고 있는 우리의 감염병 대응 체계와 보건 의료 역량이 한 차원 더 높게 발전할 것입니다. 성격되는 질병관리청을 중심으로 감염병 대응력을 한층 더 강화해 주기 바랍니다. 당장은 코로나 제약 사안의 중대 고비를 잘 넘기고 빠른 시일 안에 코로나를 안정적으로 확실히 통제해 나가길 바랍니다.
Separately, the Health Ministry will get 2 vice ministers, one to oversee welfare, planning and coordination matters, and the other to manage public health affairs. President Moon said he expects this to be an opportunity to greatly strengthen public medical and healthcare capabilities if crises like the coronavirus become commonplace. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
On Tuesday, South Korea reported 136 cases of the coronavirus. The 6th day in a row, there have been fewer than 200. Of the new cases, 120 were transmitted locally, mostly concentrated in the greater Seoul area, while the other 16 were from overseas. This brings the total number of infections nationwide to over 21,000. 5 more people have died of the virus, bringing the death toll to 341. The nation has been observing the so-called level 2.5 social distancing for the past week. The authorities say these measures could be eased if the number of daily cases drops back below 100. As of 2 p.m. Korea time, just a couple of hours ago, the more crowded parks along the Han River, including Yeouido, Duksam, and Banpo, are closed to the public. The Seoul city government says the parks have been seeing bigger crowds since social distancing guidelines were raised in the capital to level 2.5. The city will also close 43 parking lots at the Han River at 9 p.m. The measures will remain in place until further notice. There are growing expectations now that South Korea's ruling and opposition parties are going to find ways to work together. The floor leader of the opposition People Power Party, Ju Ho-young, said in his policy speech today that in times of national crisis, politicians have to unite the people. Now is the time, he said, to communicate and cooperate to stop COVID-19 and to help the people who are most vulnerable in the pandemic. But he also slammed the government for its real estate policies aiming to bring down home prices, calling them a failure that hurts ordinary people who don't yet own a home. Chu also criticized the government's proposed budget for next year, which would raise spending from this year by about $4.2 billion. Despite all the money that's been spent already, he said, businesses are not recovering. The Korea Development Institute has lowered its projections for the country's economic growth both this year and next year to reflect the slowdown caused by the recent surge in coronavirus cases. The state-run think tank's revised outlook issued Tuesday says the economy will contract by 1.1% this year. The previous forecast back in May was growth of 0.2%. As for next year, KDI is projecting growth of 3.5%. An official at KDI said the Korean economy's recovery is expected to be slow and not V-shaped. To help more people get onto the property ladder in Seoul, the government's going to let 60,000 households put their names in early for new public housing now being built. To get on the list, there are certain conditions. For example, you can't own a home already. Ji-young has the details.
As part of the plan to increase the supply of new homes in the capital, the South Korean government will offer a total of 60,000 public housing unit pre-subscriptions by 2022. These units will be in Incheon, Goyang and Namyangju in Gyeonggi-do Province, and several other cities that have been designated as public housing sites for the third stage of South Korea's new town development plan. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi announced at a ministerial meeting on Tuesday that the initiative will start next July.
The government is offering 60,000 pre-subscriptions so that people can actually get a sense of the improving housing situation in the capital. These are among the 240,000 public housing units to be supplied in the greater Seoul area by 2022.
Under the plan, 30,000 public housing pre-sales are to be made available next year, with the same number being offered again in 2022. With the pre-subscription, tenants will be selected 1 or 2 years before the actual subscription period. The finance minister also said the government will improve public transport for the public housing sites, which were originally selected for their ease of access to Seoul. This follows the government's proposal last month to supply 132,000 additional homes in Seoul and the surrounding area. The government will also increase the supply of mid-sized units that are between 60 and 85 square meters by up to 50% to match the high demand for such homes. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Good afternoon.
Well, the U.S. stock markets were closed on Monday for Labor Day. Investors waiting to see whether the sell-off continues when they open back up. European stocks were higher Monday, though. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, last week, U.S. market showed quite significant drop for 2 days in a row. And the NASDAQ actually declined by about 3.3%, which is the most since March, the first time since the March. People are continued to concern about the overall economic conditions, that the level of the rise of the equity market might be too high versus the economic condition at the current point in time. But nevertheless, we are seeing some signals that the economy is recovering. And that has resulting into stabilization of the market prices that we saw in terms of the afternoon for U.S. market. The market is closed for Monday and it will be opening today, and the futures are showing that the market might be doing somewhat of a recovery tonight. Also, the European market, if you look at that, the DAX 30, the German market was up more than 2%. The Stoxx 50 also was up about 2%. So overall, European market did very strong movement of rise. The main reason for that is because of the hope for the global economic recovery and the prospect of the COVID-19 vaccines, where the Sanofi of France said that the vaccine is developing with the Britain's GlaxoSmithKline, and that it will cost less than 10 francs which is actually much lower than people's expectations, and that could be the reasons why the economy might be doing well into the future if the vaccine comes out. All in all, this has resulted into the overall market for this week to do some recovery from the last week's quite a bit of decline for U.S. market.
And here in Korea, the Kospi is up again, crossing back above the 2,400 point mark during trading. The Kosdaq down, though. What was driving the trade today, and what's your outlook for Korean stocks?
Yes, as you said, today's market, the Kospi has recovered above 2,400 level, which is the one of the highest numbers since that we have been seeing in the last 2 years or so. Currently there's continuation of struggle against the COVID-19 pandemic worries right now, but the market seems to be taking some positive news from the Samsung Electronics news, where they are doing a deal with the U.S. in terms of 5G equipment. Overall, the presidential office also said that the draft of additional budget was more than 7 trillion won, which is about 5.88 billion, to fund another set of disaster relief subsidies as the greater Seoul area faced an extended week of social distancing to contain the COVID-19 virus. Korea has reported about 119 new cases. The level of the cases are declining somewhat, but because of this, the social distancing is quite severe at this point in time. All in all, if the level of these additional new patients increase stabilizes, then with this additional budget, Korea can do some additional recovery in terms of the economic growth. And also we are seeing some positive news from the export side. So yes, the economy is not doing well because of the COVID-19, but it is probably showing somewhat of improvement. Therefore, it can support the current equity market rise that we're seeing in Korea.
Now, Samsung Electronics has signed this deal with the American telecom company Verizon to supply them with equipment for 5G. It's worth more than $6 billion, this deal. Is it the start of something bigger, or what do you make of this deal?
I think this is very important, and that Samsung Electronics have won a 7.9 trillion won, which is about $6.6 billion to provide 5G equipment and solution to Verizon Communications in U.S. Clearly, it is a big win for Samsung Electronics. The contract was finalized last Friday, and it is valid until 2025, so next 5 years. So clearly, this is a positive news for Samsung, while it is a negative news for Huawei Technology of China. Clearly, right now, the technology is getting a bit of a political, where the U.S. government is actually even considering to put some pressures on Chinese makers in terms of semiconductor, on SMIC, in terms of export numbers, export equipment products. So all in all, the U.S. government's attack towards the China seems to be in all areas, including the 5G as well as semiconductor side. So if that's the case, then Korea's benefit will be quite big versus the negative news for the U.S. for China would be quite significant, and that has resulted into quite significant drop of share prices yesterday. Today, it seems to be stabilizing for China, but overall, it seems that the Korea is a beneficiary as well as Taiwan versus China is being a bit negatively affected because of these measures from the U.S. government.
Indeed. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Always good to get your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A new service from the Bank of Korea will let you put the change you get at the store directly into your bank account, so you never have to carry around coins. This is part of the BOK's Coinless Society project. Pei-Eun-ji has this report.
A customer goes over to the register and pays in cash, but instead of receiving his change in coins, he opens a mobile app. When the cashier scans the QR code, the change is directly transferred into his bank account. This new service by the Bank of Korea was invented as part of the Coinless Society project, which aims to eliminate loose change from our lives.
This service reduces the inconvenience of having to carry around change, while also lowering the social cost of issuing and circulating cash.
The convenience store chain Ministop was the first to launch the service last Thursday at all of its stores nationwide. By the end of the year, the service will be available at more than 7,000 convenience stores, including eMart 24, as well as 15 department stores and 8 outlet shops run by Hyundai. For those who have difficulty using a mobile app, a card linked to the customer's bank accounts can also be used.
We're thinking this service will benefit retailers as they don't have to go to banks all the time to change coins.
A similar trend can also be seen in coffee shops. 6 out of 10 Starbucks in Korea are cashless stores, which means stores prefer to accept card payments. The Coinless system is likely to spread to more stores, slowly making coins a thing of the past. 배은지, Arirang News.
And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.